Today, we are going to be talking about firms scaling and what some of the interesting points as we've scaled at Acuity that we've had to overcome. Also, we're going to talk about some cool tools that can actually work alongside of you while you're scaling. And we've got a great guest here to talk about all that. And again, this is what you can expect from Drink While You Think, the happy hour conversation amongst a couple of guys who are building their firm in really, really weird ways. Matthew, would you please tell us today, who is our sponsor?
The sponsor for Drink While You Think today is Keeper. Are you a bookkeeping owner? Are you thriving? Are you struggling? Well, Keeper is the one app you need to run your bookkeeping practice. Keeper. Learn about that today on Drink While You Think.
Matthew, classic as always. Always glad to have Matthew here, the sponsor caller, my co-host, but special today, the first guest we've had so far of the year. Our buddy Ben Stein is here. Ben, welcome, my man. Ben, tell everybody who you are, what you're up to, and then what you're drinking.
Well, thank you, Kenji. So I'm excited, super honored to join y'all here. Hopefully we can kick the year off right. So I used to be the CFO of a tech startup, and that's kind of where the roots of Keeper lie. So I ran our month-end close. We were really small. I did our books. We got larger. I worked with an outsourced bookkeeping firm. And shocker, you don't have to spend a whole lot of time in our world before you realize that that tech has not really kept pace with tech in maybe other industries. So we built Keeper basically to solve the problems that I had as a CFO, and to solve the problems that the bookkeeping firms that we started working with had as they ran more than just one close a month. And really, it's been just like this iterative 2-year now long journey of working with firms as they have scaled. So we've seen some of our like early customers have like doubled and tripled and quadrupled their client base, which has been really cool. But yeah, so honored to be on here. Thank you so much.
Glad to have you. What do you got? Yeah, what do you got that you're drinking today?
So what I am drinking is not what you are drinking, because I am tragically gluten intolerant. But so what I am drinking is a Prophecy Pinot Grigio 2021. It's a great year for grapes.
Ooh, nice, nice, very nice.
That was. I can remember that year.
Well, Matthew and I are not gluten intolerant, and we are drinking. Look what Ben and the team at Keeper sent us. We are drinking Stein Gold. We are very excited about this. Stein Gold from Frosttown Brewing. It is a cream ale, which is funny enough, I had a cream ale on our last episode. So back-to-back cream ales. I'm pumped about this. Okay, I got to ask, I mean, did you just kind of find this like, hey, cool, it's got my name in it, so I'm going to use this? Or is there some connection here to this beer, Ben?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So this, I think this is it's a great name for a beer, and it's a better story.
Nice.
So Frosttown is a brewery in Houston that is run by the son of a business partner of my dad's. So my dad and his dad are in business together, and they've been in business together now, I think, for close to a decade. But I think the reason I like this beer so much is the message it tells, which is like relationships in business can go far beyond business. And so I think it's important to remember that at the end of the day, like doing business and company building is at the end of the day just working with people, and there are relationships that can come out of that last far beyond the 9 to 5.
Absolutely. I was going to say, hey, cheers to that. And by the way, cheers. Thanks for being on, Ben. Cheers, you guys. I'm very, very much digging this right from the get-go. This is a solid beer.
Yeah, you haven't tried it yet. I saw you had it.
I have not tried it yet. So this is awesome. And
for those that don't have the inside scoop, he sent us a full case, like 24. So we split it up 12 and 12, and mine was gone, and I had to get an extra from Kenji yesterday. We actually we're 20 miles apart from each other. Met up for lunch, and he brought me the Stein Gold that I'm drinking, because I have
enjoyed it.
Already consumed his. So it says.
I may have taken your sponsorship to the next level. It was great.
Yeah, I think you have. And I think that's, I like to kind of have that first sip right here on the show to give the authentic experience. And I'm going to say, even though we'll wait till the very end as always to rate the beer, this isn't going to, I feel like this is going to get a good solid one. Certainly because also too, there's a cool story behind it, which we're always big fans of. All right, Ben, before we move into other stuff, give us, how long has Keeper been around? Where are you guys located? What's the team looking like these days?
Yeah. So we launched 2 years ago, just under 2 years ago, February of 2021.
Okay.
We have grown from then to now serve like close to 1,000 accounting firms who do the books for tens of thousands of clients a month.
Nice.
Collectively. So super cool growth opportunity. And so now the team is 13 people, and the largest city that contains any one Keeper employee is 2. So that's Austin, here with me and my co-founder, Kenny. Who's actually just off
Kenny
screen.
walking around in the background there a minute
Yep.
ago. Okay, gotcha.
And so that's, so otherwise team is very distributed. I think that's been one of the unique benefits of COVID. I know this is hardly a unique take, but we wanted to build a business that was very local, like be the sort of contrarian, like everyone in the office, like got to work hard, butts in seats. And then our first ever employee that we wanted to hire, just like the right candidate for the right role, was Shayna, who was at the time our customer success manager, is now our head of customer success. And she was so obviously a perfect fit for the role, and so obviously based in Brooklyn, New York, and not wanting to move, that kind of like threw a wet blanket on our dreams of building a like Austin driven culture. But what I think we've gained from that is you can hire the best people all over the world. I mean, we have employees in Lagos, Nigeria. We have employees in Montevideo, Uruguay. We have employees in Seoul, South Korea. So it's been a really cool opportunity to go and hire the best wherever they are, rather than feeling like we're constrained to 20 miles of our office space.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, being constrained to those 20 miles is a pretty good spot, I'll say. I agree with you that looking a little broader certainly helps find the right talent. But what would you say, Matthew? We probably have, in terms of, Atlanta or Georgia's probably number one for us, would you say, in terms of
Georgia's number one,
but
Colorado's
Austin's up there. Austin's up there probably.
Colorado's number 2, and then Austin, I think is I think it's 3. I think it's 3.
Seems right. Head of taxes there. We have a number of folks.
And it's my old home too. So
really,
that's a special place in my heart.
Austin, yeah.
I'm actually curious from your perspective, because I don't know if we took the optimal. In fact, I know we didn't take the optimal approach here. But so as y'all have scaled from just a Georgia office to other states, did you go with the PEO model? Are you like set up as an individual business in Austin or in Colorado and Texas in every state that you employ people?
No, we kept it pretty simple. We did not go PEO. And initially we were doing more kind of contractors and things, but we just, we are still a Georgia LLC located here in Georgia. We're about to have our first other entity, which should be, we were just talking about it earlier, in about 3 months time. We're hoping to have our Philippines entity set up, but that's it. Otherwise we just rolled out no PEO, and
we basically used PEOs in the international markets, both in St. Lucia and in the Philippines to get started. The international version of POs, but we never did the PO in the States. So
yeah. Are you Austin originally? Is that where you're from, Ben? Or
I was born and raised in Houston, and then actually when we set up the business, we were in Utah at the time.
Okay.
And so we moved to Texas, so sort of a little bit of a homecoming for me.
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah. Is it?
My son was born in Houston.
Really?
Yeah.
It's a good place to have kids.
My son was born in Houston. My daughter's born in Austin. So you got it covered. So
last time I was there, it was right before digital CPA, and I think before I saw you at QuickBooks Connect, Ben. But I was there, Matthew was not, and I popped into Torchy's and got lunch, and I took a picture of the queso and sent it to Matthew just to troll him, just to completely just drive him a little bit crazy. It was not out of love. It was just literally just trying to give him a hard time.
Mean.
I was being mean. So anyway, great town there. So we're going to talk about scale a little bit here. I mean, y'all, was it you and Kenny just from the get-go, like just as two co-founders, and Kenny, if I remember right, is more the technical side, your business side, and it sounds like that was kind of the get-go, but now you're up to 13 team members. What's changed for you guys the most as you've scaled? I mean, maybe talk a little bit about in those 2 years, what you've seen change most.
Yeah. So when we launched Keeper in February of 21, and then until November, we didn't hire anyone. So it was just Kenny and I, and we like live together and like work out of our house. It's like very much like Kenny and I not leaving a room for like a year. And so we just like, we did everything. I like to make the analogy of the like Dutch boy and that's like putting his fingers in the dam. So it's like just plugging all the holes. And so we hired Shayna, our head of customer success, in November. And then we hired our first engineer in January of 22. And then I think at the time, it still kind of felt like almost like a school project-y vibe. Like at the time, we were doing like 6 figures in revenue, but I kind of felt like it was just like doing all these things, kind of like very much flying by the seat of our pants, which has not changed. But it felt kind of like the school, like this almost like school project kind of vibe. Yeah, and then when Keeper really felt like a business to me was when we made our third hire. So we hired Rosalind, who anyone who's a Keeper customer who's written into support has met with Rosalind. She calls herself our chat detective, but basically she answers all of our customer support requests. And at the time I was spending like 35% of my time just doing customer support in chats. Like literally I would be like on a call like this. And then I would like, while someone else was talking, like go and answer a customer support chat. So it's like super unsustainable. But the moment we hired our first full-time person in customer support, that's when it really felt like I was like, okay, we're going to like start plugging people into these roles, and those roles, as we continue to grow by an order of magnitude, will become full-time. That's been like, that was kind of this transition point for the business. And so now we have a 5-person sales team. We have should be very soon a 3-person customer success team. We have three full-time engineers, and we're adding more. So if anyone knows any engineers, by the way,
send them your way.
Yeah, send them my way. But so it's been interesting to like, you kind of grow out of these like individual contributor roles into manager roles. And that's kind of where I am today. I'm like a manager of individual contributors and moving into a manager of manager roles. Yeah. But I'd love to get the same inside information for y'all. I mean, y'all have seen what I've seen, but then like another order of magnitude again, and then like another jump after that. So I'm curious from your perspective, and especially like with the lens of like an accounting firm versus like us, like we raised venture money. We didn't have to do the whole thing profitably. I'm curious, like, what was that like for you as y'all grew the business?
You know, I'd say high level for me, and then what Matthew like.
First of all, we're starting 18 years ago, people.
Yeah. So there's a time
almost 19 this year.
Yeah,
so
no, that's the downside of not having venture behind you is you go a little slower. Well, it may not be a downside. Who knows? Maybe that's debatable whether that's a downside sometimes these days or not. That said, I'd say that growth has been both exciting, but also uncomfortable. It just kind of has that tension of it, right? To where there was a big smile on my face if someone was watching on YouTube when you were kind of describing earlier, Ben, of like just the story of the beer, right? Of where you think about those, how business can be amongst friends. And it doesn't mean it has to only be as roommates like you and Kenny, were, or like there. But there's an early period, I think, back to like Matthew and I were getting going on this. Like it is kind of really fun, even if you are plugging all the holes. And that part is sometimes I used to get worried about that you lose that, like as you get bigger. And sometimes it can feel a little bit like you lose a bit of that. That's maybe where I feel uncomfortable I feel less connected sometimes because it's just gotten bigger. But certainly the excitement of the other thing you mentioned that you're going into is being able to kind of think about managing and leading people and thinking through putting people with specific skill sets against initiatives or areas where you need them. And I think that's something really exciting about it. I like that as well too, thinking about how do you optimize an organization by getting the right people in the right spots. I feel that tension.
What was it? I wasn't here for the 2 to 10 phase. So what was that like? Because you went from 2 to 10 really relatively quickly, I feel like.
Really quick. Yeah. Then we kind of topped out, it felt like. I mean, the 2 to 10, that is that feeling. And I don't know how long it took you guys, Ben, to kind of raise capital if you did right away. I felt like it was maybe a similar feeling, even though it wasn't raising capital. There was some validation there. Like, all right, you go quickly and you get there and go, oh my gosh, it's not just the two of us anymore. Like, somebody else believes in us, whether that's customers or whether it's an investor. And that was fun. That was exciting because you get that momentum boost and you go from 2 to 10 and you're, I remember I'd stepped out of the corporate world where I was only getting to do a narrow bit of things. And now I get to do everything. And it's super fun. I love doing everything. And then after a while, that got old. Like that. Then we hit the 10, right? And Matthew, that's kind of when you came around. Like, we hit the 10 and we stuck there for a long time. And then that gets frustrating. But the 2 to 10 run up quickly was pretty exciting.
That was like an 18-monther, right? Is that 18 months or 2 years? Yeah. Or faster?
Oh, maybe no. It's probably about that. Probably maybe a couple of years, but it was pretty quick. You run up there pretty quick. So, by the way,
the next 6 years was, just so you know our history, Ben. The next 6 years was like between 8 and 12 people, and then I came on, and I like to say it's because of me, but I think what we changed to get over the 10-person plateau is Kenji made a commitment to me, which was different than he and his other partner had, and which we call kind of like Acuity 2.0, was he was going to have to work exclusively on the business, as opposed to billing his time, which was like when we're 10 people, that's a $250,000 to $500,000 hit, depending on the year, right? Just on his time, right?
Yeah.
So you have this big decision to make, like if you're going to work on the business or in the business. And that kind of took us through what I think was the next phase, which got us to probably a couple million, 3 million in revenue. That was really helpful. Wow. And then I think the biggest thing after that we worked on, or one of the things he worked on in that time, was this commitment we had to each other. We were like, okay, we can't be the people to sell stuff. Like, what does it take to take us out of sales? And he took that on, which is like a huge thing. That's a competitive advantage for us now, that we have a sales team and a marketing team that sells what we do without any of us being involved, which is very different than other accounting firms. And when I hear other accounting firms talk about it, I feel like that's been one of our biggest differentiators in an ability to scale and grow, is just that we have a focused sales and marketing team that's not related to one of the accountants. Not that accountants aren't great salespeople, but like, because we can close deals, but man, we're not very focused on that. We like doing the accounting, right?
Yeah. Sure. I think that's actually, it's interesting. You've seen this over the last like decade, I want to say, like venture growth in venture investment in bookkeeping firms, which is maybe like a subset of basically this initiative to build these modern accounting firms where the client's relationship is to the brand and not to any particular partner. I think that's so interesting because, one, like you don't like, the business itself doesn't top out at like the number of hours that an individual partner can contribute to working on an individual client base, whether it's bookkeeping or whether it's tax. And two, like I would imagine from like an end stage liquidity event perspective, it makes those businesses a lot more acquirable because you're not worried about the partner leaving and then all the value that you just bought going away.
Yeah.
Right. Which we've seen in the first trend. We've done a couple of acquisitions and mergers, and in the one where one of those was highly related to the person. Like, it was basically all the relationships related to that person. That was the most difficult kinds of acquisitions to do successfully, I feel like.
Yeah.
And we learned a lot of hard lessons about that.
I was going to say, yeah. So I'm super curious, the M&A perspective now at your scale. Is that something that you're like actively looking to do that as a growth strategy for the business, or is that still like one-off very idiosyncratic, very like must be strategically accretive.
And we've really changed our stance on this. And this is actually the way we've approached M&A is not uncommon for the way that we at Acuity and probably specifically Matthew and I approach many things. Like we get very curious about things. And that's one of the real joys we love about business ownership is like, we get to just try things out. And so we were getting hit up quite a bit by other bigger regional, larger firms, private equity, you name it, looking to kind of do, hey, why don't we acquire you? And so we sat on that side of the table for a while, and we took some of those meetings. Matthew and I took a bunch of those meetings. We're just curious. Oh, what are we worth? I don't know. Is there some big liquidity event? So we took them, of course, on curiosity, and we'd take them and we'd kind of look back at each other and kind of go, I don't know, man, that doesn't sound that great. And so we kind of had this moment where we looked at each other. I don't know. I think you said it first, Matthew. You were like, I think we're sitting on the wrong side of the table. I think being acquired, I don't think the multiples are that great. And I don't know, we're still having so much fun. And I guess it hadn't really dawned on me. And Matthew's a really good long-term strategic thinker. He's like, I think we just need to move to the other side of the table, and maybe take a look at it there just from some of the economics. And so we did that, right? And then we certainly had very different experiences. Matthew alluded to one of them. And we learned a lot through that. We're like, all right, let's switch seats. Let's be the acquirer. Let's see what that feels like. And we did that. And we got a couple of pretty different experiences on that. One that's kind of shaped our going forward place. And I mean, I'll maybe leave it to you, Matthew. Right now we're in a spot, wouldn't you say, that we're much more, we wanted to see if we could build that muscle, if we could learn about what it would take, that almost to put it in our pocket of all right, we know how to do an acquisition now. We know that for some reason, if we got jammed up organically growing, that we could go ahead and jump in and do an acquisition. Now we feel like we've got that skill set, but we're kind of now taking a look at it much more. If something were to fall in our lap or something pretty unique, then we'd kind of make a move on it versus I think we were trying to experiment and learn a bunch of things earlier. Is that fair, Matthew, or what would you add to that?
Yeah. I mean, at the dollar and cents level, the question should be, right, is just, if it's just about growth, is how can you, what's the cost of doing that organically versus doing an acquisition, right? And our sales team candidly has been able to do 7 figures of growth a year for a long time. They've been able to currently repeat that they can add 7 figures of growth every year, right? So we haven't made that team bigger in 5 years. We've just been comfortable with that 7-figure growth number. The reality is most firms are about $1 million in revenue, right?
Yeah.
And if you juxtapose what those looks like, is taking a year to grow by $1 million with a sales team spread out over a year, where you can add people and integrate them and clients on a measured basis, which is over a 12-month cycle, versus, hey, guess what? We got 10 new employees and $1 million of revenue, which is 70 customers, all at one day. It's a totally different experience. One of the challenges for people trying to sell their business, I would guess, is, if they're trying to sell to somebody that doesn't have a firm, then their processes matter and stuff like that. And if they're selling to a firm like us, all that matters is their people and their clients, and they're going to have to go through this new onboarding process for all their customers. Because if you have different processes, we've tried to do that. We did that poorly, the first one. That's just a jacked up world. That just kills your team, and it just becomes really disruptive. So we did exercise that muscle. We're not really great at the acquisition muscle, but because of the reality of how different things are, I think unless the people were just phenomenal, like we had when we merged with Catching Clouds, and unless the people were phenomenal and added a new vertical that kind of jived with what we do, really paired well, it would be a really tough sell internally right now to add a acquisition, because the integration is so rough, and our sales team is so good, and our marketing team is so great.
Yeah. So that actually brings up, and thank you so much. I mean, I think that's such an interesting perspective that I think a lot of firms would like to know, which is how do you make that decision? What is essentially build versus buy, but on the sales side,
right?
I think So you mentioned something in there, which is like our sales team reliably delivers 7 figures of growth a year, but we haven't really grown it. Is that an internal, like you're comfortable with the growth you have now and you don't have the like ambition of wanting to build a 9-figure business or a 10-figure business in accounting? And I don't know.
Yeah,
But
I think Matthew alluded to this, with talking about the acquisitions. And one of the things we really saw in taking this very compressed timeline of like onboarding clients, like, right, to where you shove 100 in the door immediately through an acquisition or whatever the number is, right? He and I are like high-fiving. We're super excited. Yeah, let's go. And we kind of looked at the faces of our team and we're like, oh my gosh, they're struggling. In fact, this last year, we were up on stage at Acuity Con, which is our annual kind of all hands kind of conference. We do a year in review, right? We kind of talk about how the year went. And I remember as we were doing that, we kind of said, hey, before we talk about all the things that we did this year, let's talk about one thing we didn't do. And that is we didn't acquire anybody. And like everyone's like cheering, right? They're like, yay, he didn't acquire anybody. And I think that was something that we recognized and took seriously when we looked at our team and thought, whoa, that really kind of unbridled aggressive growth. It put a lot of strain on the organization. It put some on me and Matthew. We certainly had some. We signed up for that. You kind of signed up for that as a founder, right? We kind of took I think Matthew's the same way too. We took a hard look at the rest of the group and thought it was rough on them. It was tough on a lot of other people. And we're like, what are we doing? Like that's a non-measured, kind of really aggressive growth path. And like Matthew's point, we've got a nice sales team that can actually drip those in over a period of time. We occasionally will get these months where, and Tyler, who's our head of sales, we've had these months where the team, remember this, Matthew? The team's like, and Tyler gets on a tear. And they're all like, we're going to start a GoFundMe to send him on vacation because like he's just, and
he's just killing it right now.
Yeah, kind of tongue in cheek on that a little bit, but some ways like you just needs to slow down because he and the team were very effective. So I think that's where for us we saw that really aggressive growth was a lot. And some of that too goes back to Matthew and I, like what our goals are. Like, is that something we felt like we really needed at that point? So, but yeah, Matthew, jump. I see you.
Yeah, I think the really interesting thing that Kenji and I have always been aligned on was why we wanted to grow. And I've seen people talk about this, and I think people don't think about this because a lot of people assume it's like financial in nature. So if it is financial in nature for you, like go have at it. For us, it's growth has always led, like our growth of our firm has always led to new challenges, which has led to our professional development and the professional development of everybody internally. It's given us ways to retain people because we created career paths for them. It kept he and I interested in this business. Candidly, if this was the $1.1 million business that I bought 9 years ago, like this would be pretty boring at this point.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That we hit the 8-figure mark in over a 9-year period of time, like that we hit 10 million. That's a great milestone, but it was measured. It was like it was at the right pace for us to continue to grow into that. If you, from a leadership perspective, I think the challenge I think a lot of our clients have, because we live in the VC world, is, you see these founders come in and these people put this money and all of a sudden they're a $10 million business overnight and they didn't have time to grow into that. So now they're getting replaced in their own company with like the professional CEO, which is crap. It's just not what we want to do, right? We have like a selfish interest in wanting to grow professionally. And I think there's a pace that if you can kind of hit close to it, it really makes this job much more fulfilling.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes me curious. I think about you and Kenny, like, right? The team and the rest of the team at Keeper. I y'all are a good bit younger than Matthew and I, so there's probably some different goals and some different, when you can kind of hunker down together in the one room and kind of crank and crank and crank. I mean, there's an energy level that probably Matthew and I don't possess anymore, or desire to go back and possess. But are you finding, what's changed in the terms, or has anything changed when you think about your financial partners, your investors who've put in, or is it still a pretty growth oriented? Like, hey, let's kind of get going. We need to kind of push through this. Is it more of a, now the change in the way things have gone? Is it more kind of, hey, hunker down, extend that runway? Or is it been a pretty consistent? Right? What's kind of the growth path, scalable path for y'all there at Keeper?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'd say it's still like, whereas you look at 2021, sort of the like excesses of the market, then like it was like you got a knob between like sustainability, profitability, and then like growth. And so 2021, I think the knob was turned up to 11, right? Like 150% towards growth. And you're like cranking it over to the side, and maybe you're raising too much capital to do that, and you're spending really inefficiently to do that. And so right now, I mean, the industry has definitely turned the knob way back, but the venture model doesn't make sense if you don't grow. The private equity model does, but the venture model, the multiples you pay for, the expectations you set when you're building, just like, I mean, think all the way up the stack, like the LPs who are investing in the GPs who are deploying this capital into the startups at these valuations, like all of that is dependent really on growth to return those numbers.
Yeah.
So we're probably like, our knob is probably at like 95% growth. But our knob kind of was there for the entire time in the business. I think that's really a reflection of the business that we're in, the market that we serve, and like who I am as a founder, as a CEO. Like, I literally make software for accountants. It would be insane if I was selling $1 for 85 cents. Like, so there's that element there. So we've always been very thoughtful about making sure that our growth is efficient, or growth is profitable. And also, just backing up for a second, we have seen so many times in this industry, so many tech partners come out and they'll be really splashy. They'll spend millions of dollars on marketing, and they'll promise the moon, and they won't deliver the moon. And then they'll also like eventually just like either go away or get like acquired by Intuit, and then like then go away, or then get like and
Intuit, if you'd like to acquire Keeper, it's still on the table.
I love Intuit. I love Intuit. They're our largest tech partner. People ask me all the time if if we're building this business to sell it to Intuit, and I tell them, like, look, if like what happens there, if you get acquired, it's like you go be like the senior product manager for Keeper within Intuit. It's like, look, if I wanted to be a PM at Intuit, there are easier ways to get that job. So to the point about providing professional development as like being a reason to start a firm and grow a firm, like that's very much true to a large extent at Keeper as well. And that actually brings me to Matthew. I think you brought up this really good point, which is that like the pace that you're on in growth. It's like, I mean, yes, thankfully it's like fiscally, financially rewarding as well, but also it keeps you interested and it excites you in the challenges and the new challenges you get to face. I'm curious, like sitting here today, January 13th, 2022 or 2023, what are the challenges that excite you most over the course of the next year?
For me, it is we've built the company to withstand downturns rather intentionally, and that's not really kind of great necessarily in upturns. Like so we built a very, what I consider, measured business and balanced business. So I'm really interested to see how we can execute when everybody else is tightening up, and to see if that proves out in this current downturn. We've been through one together before, Kenji and I, one big downturn, and so it's and he's been through a couple with Acuity. So I'm really interested. That's the most interesting thing to me, I'd really like to do some stuff around sustainability in our employees and our training efforts that I think will contribute to that, to take us to the next level. But that's kind of what's getting me excited this year.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'm curious, what are some of the things that you have done as a business that maybe sacrifice some of the highs of the highs in upturns, but that have prepared you for the upcoming economic environment we're about to live through?
One of the big things, we've done and is we've had pretty unique compensation models at Acuity. But it's interesting. We have a lot of variable compensation at Acuity, but those came out of the reason those weren't really built in to say, hey, well, when business softens, like everyone's going to take a hit, or when it's great. That wasn't the intent. The problem, the challenge we were trying to solve for there was we did learn very early on that for us to be competitive in the marketplace for good talent, we really couldn't compete on benefits or compensation. We had the E&Ys, the Deloittes of the world. There was just a lot of other things out there that were just making it different. We did see that there was a challenge in the marketplace of where the hours, the inflexibility in the profession was really high. We still see a lot of that today. Matthew and I had been kind of burned by that. Him in more corporate and in big 4, big 6. I had that in big 6 as well too. I had that in CFO jobs. It just was it could be a bit of a punishing profession. And so we wanted to give people some choice of like, all right, if you come and do good work at Acuity, you figure out how much you want to work. This notion of a 40 or 60-hour work week, whatever it was kind of seemed to us to be a little arbitrary. Like, why does that exist? Isn't that some kind of industrial age mechanism to kind of protect workers? Like we're knowledge workers now, right? Shouldn't we all determine how much we want to work, whether that's in our apartments or wherever with our roommates cranking away all the time, or whether it's like, hey, I've got kids now, or whatever it is, a stage of life. And so by designing variable compensation to solve for flexibility and give people more control, which they didn't have in the profession of their time, it also kind of by nature built in a bit of that shock absorber to where if there's downturns or people, whether it's macro, people or external, we see a slowdown, or whether it's internal, people say, hey, I just need to take time off this summer because the kids are out of school and we want to go take some vacations. We were intentional about building in some interesting compensation models that were a bit of a shock absorber. That's one thing that's kind of unique. I don't know, Matthew, what are some others?
Yeah, when I say that, what we sacrificed during that time is other people, when they have fixed costs and people that are working 90 hours a week, they have record profits, right? Well, we as a company decided that's not who we want to be. So, so we sacrificed that in the good years. And the bad years, like our employees get to benefit from that in the good years, right? And the bad years, like if things were to slow down, like everybody shares kind of proportionally, which I think is really, really unique and one of our superpowers. But that's what I meant by that.
Yeah. So. And I'd say that, and on top of that, it's still kind of in that flexibility thing. Matthew and I talk a lot about, because we've been through a few different cycles and big organizations and some of the creme de la creme accounting firms out there, we've lived those, we've been there, is that we've thought about like what for us as owners it means for success. And I've typically thought of, okay, when you make a lot of, what do you want to do? You make a lot of money, what does that give you? Well, for me, I'm like, that's freedom, right? I think money can't buy happiness. I do believe it can buy a sense of freedom. It can buy, if I have enough money, I can kind of do what I want to do. And we've a little bit disrupted that, I think, Matthew and I have, to where, he and I don't take home some huge, massive paychecks. We do not. We live pretty, pretty humbly, I would say, for the most part, probably less than people think. But we have an incredible sense of autonomy and flexibility and freedom. We do essentially do kind of what we want to do. Luckily, one of those things is we really enjoy working on Acuity and working in the space. But he and I are taking time off next week to go do some skiing with some friends. We kind of bounce around, we do a lot with our kids and families. We just have a lot of that. And so I think we've kind of realized that instead of kind of driving towards some liquidity event to give us some huge number so we can then go do whatever we want to do, we just kind of built it into the model today where like it's already there. It took some time. That wasn't there initially, but we got to a point to where let's make sure that we've got a business that actually produces a sense of freedom and fun. And we want that to be with everyone. If everyone gets to kind of say, hey, cool, this integrates well with how I work in my life. I'm getting professional development. I'm getting a lot of freedom to do things I want to do. It just has we just get to hold on to a lot of people who want to stay and keep committing to Acuity, including the two of us, right? To where we don't get fatigued and go, oh, another year with an Acuity. I don't know if I can handle it. And you go, oh, I'm rolling into 2023 saying, man, this is going to be a fun year. We're going to try to open up operations overseas. We're going to go speak at this conference. We're going to hear, we're going to connect with other firm owners. We're going to go add some new tech stack partners. I mean, all those things for us just get to be like, we geek out. We're just a bunch of so anyway.
Somebody gets to go to
That's
Italy this year with freaking Expensify. So not really.
Wow.
Cool.
Well, we're waiting.
Yeah,
Don't worry. Keep her one day. I mean, like you said, they've been conservative. You didn't go make them huge splash with all the venture, all that investment you raised. But one day they'll be the Keeper conference, and it'll probably be in some amazing location, Matthew. And maybe if you're nice enough to Ben.
Oh, I'm gonna go see Ben in September when I go to Austin. So
There you
we're
go.
talking about a September trip.
All he needs is some of that Chewy's queso. So
oh yeah, Chewy's creamy jalapeno, baby.
That's all he needs. But I think that there's a lot of different ways to kind of get there. And I think for us, we always loved kind of working with and kind of partnering with other firms like you guys, because again, we serve predominantly the venture and the SaaS space. So we love talking about, I tell everyone when they think that Acuity is unique, I'm like, not really. It's all we basically do is we rip off the things that guys like you are doing, Ben. Like we just follow the lead of like venture-backed SaaS companies and kind of how that growth hacking happened and apply it in the accounting space. And so that's all we've really done over the years. And we've always been grateful to be around in co-working spaces, around other tech companies, serving tech companies. We're always excited when we get to see new solutions like you guys come to market, because it not only benefits the profession and helps kind of scale and grow and a lot of the issues we have with not enough team members and people out there, but we love just take a lot of cues from folks like you and like, oh, interesting. Look, listen to the way they're building customer success or their support function. Like we do a lot of stealing, if you will.
Well, no, I think that's such a, just to add to that, I was talking to the one of the co-founders of a venture-backed bookkeeping startup, and he was kind of explaining this thesis to me, which is, look, if you look at ACV, average annual contract value for a SaaS startup, super important metrics that determines that input gives you the output of what your sales motion looks like, and what you need to do, how much you can spend to acquire a customer. And so if you look at bookkeeping, it has the same regular monthly charge that SaaS does. I think it's important to do a gross profit margin adjustment, but if you have $1,000 charge and you put $500 of labor into it, gross profit on that is $500, which is the same as if you had a $500 charge and then 100%. you put $0 into it, then you have $500. So, but below the line, that ends up being pretty much the same business. And so you sort of model bookkeeping businesses like that. You're like, wow, these are a lot more like SaaS businesses than you might conventionally have thought.
Yeah, we do in our LTV to CAC calculation, CAC to LTV kind of metrics. We only do margin. We don't do revenue.
Yeah,
it's exactly right. You nailed it. I think that's something that we got lucky with because we worked with so many SaaS startups. We're like, actually, this bookkeeping model is much more like a SaaS business. And we ran it, we still run it in many ways differently. We emulate so many, metrics that are in the SaaS space, but to a critical point you made, you just need to go change the margin. The margins are different in those businesses, where the categorization of the expenses are. And if you do that, you can really take advantage of some really good, helpful metrics that most accounting firms don't think of, but they're sitting over there in SaaS businesses all day long that are really, really helpful when you think about the direction of the business. So I don't know. We geek out on these conversations all the time. This one's been an awesome one, but I think we need to have Ben back on because he's such a good interviewer. He's asking questions of us. Usually we're like peppering
works.
our guests.
Well, if you're allowed, I want one more question because
Yeah,
I think
come on, man.
it's the question that I feel like if I were a firm owner, this would be the question on my mind every time I see Kenji Matthew, which is like, okay. And Matthew, you alluded to this earlier. You were like, firm grew really quickly from 2 employees to 10 employees, and then kind of sat at 10 employees for like 8 to 12 employees for like years. And you said the thing that changed was that Kenji committed to investing in spending his entire time building the business and working on the business rather than in the business. And that's like, that line has been so commonly like brought out that like, I think everyone in the accounting world has heard that line and they're like, great. And now I got to go do this tax return. We're like, great. And now I got to go like make these adjusting journal entries. And you end up losing the time that you're supposed to be spending working on the business. So I'm curious, Kenji, from like question to you, what was the hardest thing to let go of and how did you end up letting go of it so you could free yourself to actually focus on growing from the business that Acuity was today and to or Acuity was back then to the 10 plus figure 150 plus employee company that it is now?
Yeah, I will say very honest, the hardest thing to give up was the compensation, because that step back at that size absolutely means you're taking comp away. Matthew alluded to comp away from the business, but that really is coming out of your pocket. You're at that size at that point to where, because it's a services business, when you get going and started, you can put a lot of cash compensation in your pocket pretty quickly as a consultant with very little overhead. So when you stop billing, it comes out of your pocket. I had to have a conversation, with my wife about it. I'm like, hey, here's what we're going to do. We had little kids. We're like, all right, this is going to be a risk. This is going to be a little painful. I can still go back and look at those years on the tax return, old tax returns, like, whoa, look at that dip, right? And so we just had to be okay with that, knowing that was a risk that like that couldn't persist for very long. Matthew and I kind of looked at like, we can't let this happen for very long. We have responsibilities, not because we have immaculate homes or fancy cars. We're like, we have mouths to feed. We got diapers and things like that. We got to get back on it. And we knew what our earning potential had been previously in the market as CFOs of tech companies and things like that. And we didn't want to just go be stupid about it. But I think that was like where I think people get stuck. I at least I think so, because I don't know. Some people say, "Oh, it's control."
Well,
it's painful. It can be real painful.
I mean, and if you just do the math on it, right? If you're just saying, okay, if you have a business that's running at 20% EBITDA, right, which is cash flow to the owner, right, and you take the owner's billings out, so for every $1 you take out of the owner's billings, you have to replace with $5 to be a push on cash flow. If you're running at 20% EBITDA, like if you're running a highly efficient business, and most of us aren't. Most of us, that's a 10x, right? If we're lucky, right? So that was. I just want to echo that. That was a painful. Like we had to go from $1.1 million in revenue to $2.3 million in revenue in a very quick period of time, to be able to stem the tide on that. And it was still hard. I mean, my first K1 was, I think I still have it. I think it's like negative $8,000 for the year.
Yeah.
It was a bad year, Ben. It was like, why the hell did I let Kenji talk me into this? Why did 100%. I leave my partnership? Why did I do that? I don't know if I'm going to be able, like, I'm going to have to talk to Laura. Like,
that's his wife, by the way.
Yeah. So that's the answer. If you want to be Acuity, you have to deal with the just like terrible squeeze of going from good to bad before you get back to good again.
But but again, I'll pair it too. What do you do when you come in and go into a startup, right? Same thing. Who's making huge cash compensation? Startup? Nobody is. You trade.
Kenny and I talk about this all the time.
100%.
Like we feel uniquely lucky that we're like, I mean, I'm 28 now, but we were like 25, 26 when we're starting to get things off the ground. Uniquely lucky that that's a time in your life when you can crunch down. And I mean, still to this day, we don't take anywhere close to what you would call like a market salary for a CEO of a company of our size. Yeah. But like that happens when you're in your mid 20s and you can just do that. And I'm like, I look at these companies, like startups that were founded by people in their 30s and their 40s with like kids and mortgage payments and private schools and all that stuff. And I'm like I look at it in amazement, and that's what y'all had to do to grow Acuity. And so like,
but that's
really incredible
is that you had to sacrifice the short term for the long term. And I think that there's certainly some people who say, like, I love serving clients. I don't want to let someone else do it. The quality's not good up to me. And that's fair for many, but I do think also that point we all just mentioned is you do have to sacrifice in the short term for the long term. You're playing for that long-term outcome. And in the venture world, it is maybe a huge liquidity event. There could be some of that in the accounting space down the road, but I think also, we were doing it for like, all right, we got to get to a spot, to a firm that we're going to enjoy working in long term, whatever that means to us. And so, but we knew that that wasn't going to happen. If he and I were both billing clients all the live long day, doing all the sales calls all the long, we weren't going to make it. Like he's going to be back in public. I'm going to be back in, a private tech company, and that's fine. Those are good things. We had good choices there, but like that's where we were going to. So,
but that gave me a runway. I mean, it took 6 years after that to where I could do the same thing. Yeah. That's the next thing, right?
Yeah.
Like how do you do it for the next person?
As soon as I did it, we were like, how do we get Matthew the same spot where he knows?
It took a little bit longer. But
we got there. So yeah, it's fun. We love talking about scaling and growth. And Matt, we've had some good panel discussions at some point. We want to even do some more about, like, everyone thinks it's so glamorous, and it can be, but I love the fact that you went there on this question, Ben, because you do have to go through a lot to get there, and sometimes have some patience. So
my favorite question I ever got about this on a panel was like, they're like, I had made the comment, like, it was tough for me being in Atlanta and clients coming up to me and saying, oh, I use Acuity, and I don't know who they are. And the moderator says, at least you know all your employees. And I'm like, dude, you don't understand our scale.
I don't.
Like, that's another level. Like, that hurts me to my core that I haven't met all of our employees and don't know their kids' names and stuff like that. But it's 150 people. There's like math behind.
Yeah, that's right at Dunbar's number, where it's like, if you knew no one else, that's 150 is the limit.
Yeah, if I didn't have an 80-person family, I'd be okay, right? Like, in my
Dunbar was not wrong on that, right? There's just some things on that makes
so sense. Really what that means, Dunbar's number is like, that's the root of that is like, that's how big human tribes got in like early humanity. So I'm sure y'all have to go, but like, I will leave you with this. Y'all Acuity have not just built a business, you have built a tribe.
we may be done. This is maybe as far as we get based on that, but you never know. But we'll see what Dunbar's is. Okay, before the final thing we always have to do, we have to go on to Untappd and do some rankings of our beers. I've got.
If you have a wine, you just have to rate it between 0 and 5.
So yeah, it's 0 and 5 scale. Can you see it over here, guys? The Stein Gold.
It's taking forever. Your internet is terrible today, dude.
Is it terrible today? Sorry about that. You guys.
Acuity, a good business, but not good enough to improve Kenji's Wi-Fi.
My Wi-Fi is not. It usually means I've got my kids at home and they're all.
Kenji's Wi-Fi is brought to you by a limited thing with a college student at home.
Exactly. All the kids on Netflix here or on Xbox or something here at the house. So nothing's showing up, Matt. No. Okay, we'll just go.
Let's just do it, dude.
Okay, we'll just do it. So the Stein Gold. We'll do ours first here, Matthew. You and I are both going to rate Stein Gold from Frosttown Brewing, the cream ale, on a scale of 0 to 5. Matthew, what would you give the Stein Gold?
Well, I really enjoyed this beer for the last month, so it's a 4.5 for me, man.
That's exactly what I was going to give it to. 4.5. I'm putting both of them in. It
was a really good beer. I really appreciate it. Like, your dad has great taste. This is like part of his like recipe in this, and like getting to work with people. That's awesome. So
thank you.
Very good. Thank you for sending that.
Well, I will make sure that you are stocked with an adequate supply.
That's been awesome. All right, give us on your. So you were drinking.
Okay, so the Prophecy 2021 Pinot Grigio. It is on the scale of, if they have it at the convenience store closest to your house. So I'm gonna rank it on that scale. So that's a 0 to 1. I will say it's a 1.
It's available. It's available.
It is available.
It's not worth a drive past your normal grocery store. That's the way to put it.
There you go.
That's the bin. It
should not. Yeah. Specialty stores. This is This is the highest praise you can give from a 28-year-old on a bottle of wine.
I love it. I love it. Well, this has been great. Ben, thank you so much for the great beer. Thanks for spending some time and coming on. This was a delight talking to you. Listeners, remember, subscribe. You don't want to miss all the goodness, and you make sure we'll have a bunch of links on social over to what we're drinking, over to connect with Ben, and also to
check out Keeper. Yeah.
to learn more about them, and also just to Frosttown Brewing. All the links will be there. Check them out. But cheers, everyone. Thanks for coming on. And Ben, thank you especially for coming on. Cheers,
my pleasure. Thank y'all for having me on. This was a wonderful conversation. I learned a ton. I hope some of your listeners also will learn a ton about what it takes to build the next Acuity. So I look forward to talking again soon.
Thanks, Ben.